Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to our random review. Today's random review comes all the way from 1977, and it's The Deep, directed by Peter Yates, who brought you Robbery, Bullet and Krull. And this stars Nick Nolte, Jacqueline Bissett, Robert Shaw, Lou Gossett Jr., Eli Wallach, and Robert Tessier, who you might not recognise the name, but you'd certainly recognise the face. He's usually a bald, heavy baddie in films, but in this film he actually has hair, which is quite surprising because you're just so used to seeing him bald. And he's actually on the side of the goodies, not the comedy trio, the good characters in the film. This is imprint Blu-ray number 28. You can see they've chosen a nice legible black cover with dark blue for the extras. It's a little bit more legible in the back of the box, but I'll get to the extras in a little bit. 1977, 2 years after Jaws. So this is a film that suffers because it's based on a book by Peter Benchley. Obviously, after the success of Jaws, it was pretty much let's film anything that Peter Benchley has written. Expecting the success of Jaws. Obviously, the artwork suggests a very similar artwork to Jaws, and the tagline is anything worth the terror of the deep, which again suggests there's something down in the depths that's perhaps eating people, which of course the film has nothing to do with. The film is about a couple played by Nick Nolte and Jacqueline Bissett who are diving in the Caribbean, and they go off-piste a little bit and find a little ampule of liquid and a coin, and they're intrigued. They go to the local museum, and they kind of see a display about a famous treasure hunter, played by Robert Shaw, who of course was in Jaws, and he plays a kind of salty sea dog in this as well. Not full-blown Quint. He plays a character called Treese. These Peter Benchley characters are almost to the Cronenberg level as far as names. Not quite, obviously. Cronenberg has cornered the market on strange character names. But it's this character called Treese. So he's not quite fully blown Quint, but he's irascible. He has a history. And he's not really interested in the coin, but he's interested in the little vial. So the couple are approached by Lou Gossett Jr.'s character, who is a glass collector, and he's kind of interested in the little bottle that they found. Nick Nolte says, we never found a little bottle, I don't know what you're talking about. But it turns out those little bottle contains morphine, and Lou Gossett Jr. is actually a Haitian drug dealer, and the wreck that they accidentally came across is a World War II ship called the Goliath, and might have thousands of little ampules of morphine. But what intrigues the couple and Robert Shaw is the fact that there seems to be old jewellery in the same spot, and then they discover there's actually another shipwreck under the Goliath that may have treasure. So to get Lou Gossett Jr. and his heavies off of them, they agree to dive, get the morphine, and he can go to America and sell it in the open market, make millions of dollars profit. But they obviously are more interested in the treasure if they can get proof of the ship, which leads to a fun little detective story as they try and work out the origin of the ship under the ship. There's also Eli Wallach as an old sea dog who was actually on the Goliath, but Robert Shaw doesn't kind of treat him that well, so he gets persuaded by Lou Gossett Jr. to get some information. The two things that I remember from watching The Deep when it was on television 25 years ago, there's two scenes. One, there's a moray eel that pops out. That's as close as the terror of the deep. And the other scene is when Jacqueline Bisset pretty much gets sexually assaulted by a chicken foot and blood and part of a Haitian voodoo ritual. For some reason that always stuck in the mind. But as far as underwater terrors, I mean, there's a few sharks. There's a scene with a few sharks, but certainly not 30-foot sharks. And like I say, the moray eel pops up to say hello a couple of times. But this is more just a rip-roaring adventure and detective story, which is actually a lot of fun, but it suffered at the time because it wasn't Jaws, and obviously it's the same author as Jaws, the same kind of poster. It's called The Deep. It's got Robert Shaw in it. Shaw's fantastic. Sadly, he would die a year later. But what makes it kind of interesting, and certainly which makes the imprint release worth picking up, is as a retrospective a vintage making of narrated by Robert Shaw, which is wonderful, as he stands about in beaches in his jumper describing the dangers of the shoot, which was fairly dangerous, because the actors did do the diving, including Robert Shaw. And what's more amazing is the fact that, he says Jacqueline Bisset obviously dived, Nick Nolte dived, Lou Gossett Jr. dived, Robert Shaw dived, the director Peter Yates dived, the producer, he dived, and none of them had dived before the making of this film. So they did, cast and crew did a combined 9,000 dives in 4 oceans. Obviously they just would make everything in a studio in a tank nowadays, but it's the fact that they did over 9,000 dives, so they get to the stage where you would actually, watching the film, you would think they've been divers for years, but none of them had actually dove before the making of the film. So it's an absolutely fascinating making of, and a lot of the shots, they're down underwater between 30 and 100 feet. They're using equipment, they're going in and out of like wrecks, so it was pretty dangerous. They probably wouldn't get away with it nowadays, but the vintage documentary is absolutely wonderful. And like I say, Robert Shaw's fantastic as he stands in his sweater reading these corny lines that whoever wrote the narration supplied. But the other interesting special feature is there is a 3-hour special edition, which I'm not sure is available anywhere, But we get 6 extended scenes from the 3-hour cut of the film, including a prologue which shows us the Goliath sinking in World War II, and the captain is Cameron Mitchell. But obviously in the final cut of the film, the prologue is nowhere to be seen, and it has a fairly weird and scary end to that prologue. There's a wonderful extended conversation between Robert Shaw and Lou Gossett Jr., which is wonderful. There's hints towards a previous kind of possibly working relationship between Robert Shaw and Luke Gossett Jr.'s drug dealer. There's information about Robert Shaw's previous life that isn't mentioned in the 2-hour 5-minute cut of the film, which actually gives him a bit more depth and again adds more nuance to his relationship with Lou Gossett Jr. So the extra scenes that were in the 3-hour special edition, which again, somebody can correct me in the comments below if that's available on Blu-ray anywhere. But we do just get the 2-hour cut here, but there's a good half an hour of extra footage on this imprint release. And like I say, the vintage documentary of the making of the film is pretty wonderful, because again, the scene with the sharks, they are real sharks. And again, nowadays they probably wouldn't make it the way they actually made it in 1977. So is it as good as Jaws? Of course it's not. But it's a nice, enjoyable little film that is hurt just by being associated because it's the same author and one of the same stars as Jaws. I mean, it's not perfect, but there's some really tense moments, when their oxygen lines get attacked by sharks, or it's well shot by Peter Yates, and it's actually paced really well, even though it's 2 hours long. They are the kind of threesome of Nolte, Shaw and Bissett. Are characters you want to spend time with. Eli Wallace, very good. Lou Gossett Jr. is really good, and provides good menace. And like I say, you get Robert Tessier with hair, which is almost worth the price of admission. So thanks very much for watching this random review of The Deep. Flawed perhaps, but still well worth a look, and it does look gorgeous on Blu-ray. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments below what you think of The Deep, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.